You've got two voyages, separated by more than 100 years, but both drawn to the exact same spot in the vast, deep ocean. One was this incredible monument to the Gilded Age, and the other, well, it was a product of our time. This is the story of how they ended up sharing a similar fate. So, what's the connection here? I mean, on the surface, you'd think absolutely nothing, right? They lived in totally different worlds, with different technologies, different goals. But there's this powerful, unseen force that connects their final journeys. Okay, let's dive into this. The answer isn't a person, it's a place, a very specific, very famous place. We're talking about the resting place of the RMS Titanic. It's a destination that has captivated people for generations, and it's what ties these two incredibly different stories together forever. To really get this connection, we've got to start by looking at the vessels themselves. On the one hand, you have the RMS Titanic. I mean, this thing was a monster, a true behemoth of steel and rivets stretching 4 city blocks long. It was the biggest moving object of its time. And then on the other side, you've got the Titan submersible, this compact little capsule made of carbon fiber and titanium designed to pierce the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean. Each one was a perfect snapshot of its era. The Titanic was the absolute peak of the industrial age, this powerful belief that with enough steel and engineering, you could conquer nature itself. The Titan, though, that was pure Silicon Valley. It was all about disruption, about moving fast and breaking things. Except, they were applying that idea to one of the most hostile environments on our planet. But, of course, these aren't just stories about metal and machines. They're human stories. So let's take a look at who was on board and what drove them to be there. Okay, so back in 1912, you've got Major Archibald Butt, a top aide to President Taft, who's on the Titanic coming home from Europe. And he wasn't on vacation. No, this trip was actually a desperate attempt to de-stress from being caught in the middle of a nasty political feud between Taft and his old boss, Teddy Roosevelt. Now, you fast forward to 2023, the passengers on the Titan, they were called mission specialists, and they were paying a fortune for the ultimate adventure trip. And losing Major Butt wasn't just some society news. It was a profound national tragedy, felt all the way at the top. This quote from a heartbroken President Taft just shows you how deep that personal connection was. He saw Butt as a hero, a man who reportedly went down with the ship, helping others. So, let's get into the nuts and bolts now. Let's look at the engineering. How were these vessels actually built, and what choices led them to the bottom of the ocean? Now, before we go any deeper, pun definitely intended, you need to understand this term, PVHO. It stands for Pressure Vessel for Human Occupancy. This is everything. Getting this part right is the absolute #1 rule of deep-sea exploration. If you fail here, there are no second chances. When you look at the Titan's design, a few major red flags immediately jump out to the experts. First, the shape. For the kind of crushing pressures down at the Titanic wreck, you want a sphere. It's just the strongest shape, period, because it distributes all that pressure evenly. The Titan used a cylinder. Then there's the material, carbon fiber. There are literally no industry standards for using this stuff in a deep diving sub. And to make things even trickier, they bonded that carbon fiber body to titanium end caps. Mixing materials like that creates these incredibly complex and unpredictable weak spots. And hey, you didn't have to be some outside expert to see the problems. This quote, this is from OceanGate's own director of marine operations. He called the submersible a high school project. I mean, wow, that tells you everything you need to know about how the vessel's readiness was viewed from the inside. And this brings us to a really crucial and tragic parallel between these two voyages. There were clear warnings that were, for very different reasons, completely ignored. So here's the key difference in how those warnings were handled. The Titanic's disaster was partly a catastrophic failure of communication. The ice warnings existed, they just didn't get to the bridge in time. With OceanGate, the failure was much more fundamental. Leadership was told directly by experts inside and outside the company that the vessel was unsafe, and they simply chose to dismiss those concerns. And we're not just talking about a single ignored email here. This timeline shows how things just spiraled in early 2018. First, their own safety director gets fired for raising concerns. Then, a whistleblower complaint is filed. And finally, an entire industry group sends a letter expressing, and I quote, unanimous concern. The alarm bells weren't just ringing, they were screaming. And the potential for disaster wasn't just some theory on a whiteboard. Just look at this. This is what was left of a scale model of the Titan's hull after a pressure test. It imploded. It crumpled like a soda can. The company had seen with its own eyes what a catastrophic failure of their design looks like. So, why? Why on earth would you push ahead? This quote from the CEO, Stockton Rush, really gets to the core of it. He saw industry standards, safety regulations, the entire process of getting a vessel certified or classed as an obstacle to innovation. He was actively and very publicly fighting against the established safety culture of his entire industry. So all of this, the ambition, the engineering gambles, the ignored warnings, it all culminates in the final moments of both vessels. Two terrifying but very different ends. The sinking of the Titanic was a slow-motion tragedy. It played out over nearly 3 hours. There was panic and chaos, for sure. But there was also time for incredible acts of bravery, time for last goodbyes. The end for the Titan's crew was the absolute opposite. It was silent, and it was over in milliseconds. To really understand why, just look at this number. Almost 6,000 pounds of pressure pushing on every single square inch of that submersible. To put that in perspective, that's like having a heavy SUV balanced on a postage stamp. Any flaw, any tiny weakness, and it's game over. Instantly. Catastrophic implosion. It's a terrifying term. It means the hull didn't just crack or leak. It failed completely, collapsing inward on itself with unimaginable violence. The entire event was over faster than the human nervous system can even process pain. So in the end, what's left behind? What are the legacies of these two tragedies, separated by 111 years of history? On the left, you see the Butt Millet Memorial Fountain in D.C. It's a permanent public monument to sacrifice and friendship. On the right, the Titan. Its legacy is, well, it's a lot more complicated. It's become a cautionary tale about the real dangers of unchecked ambition and what happens when you ignore collective wisdom. And that really leaves us with this final question, doesn't it? Despite more than a century of incredible technological progress, the same themes keep playing out. Human ambition pushing the limits of our technology, and the catastrophic price of hubris when we come face to face with the truly unforgiving power of the natural world.